In the enchanting atmosphere created by the glow of neon lights, young gamer Mira was completely absorbed in the game music that echoed through the alluring pink ears of her headset. She was immersed in a space-themed game flashing across her monitor, an immensely popular universe where interstellar journeys took place, galactic wars raged on, and colorful yet fierce alien races ruled. Mira had been a fan of space movies and science fiction novels since childhood. There was nothing like experiencing this mysterious cosmic atmosphere in her favorite games. She could escape her ordinary life, completely detach from her own world, and become the hero of this digital realm. Thanks to her Keter-shaped headset, she could hear the strange sound effects and communication frequencies of carefully designed spaceship cockpits as if she were truly there. That night, without taking a break from her stream, she was pursuing a peculiar mission in the game, the discovery of ancient ruins belonging to an unknown planet in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard as she focused on the screen, trying to decipher the symbols on the warning window that had suddenly appeared beside her. However, this was no ordinary mission notification. The strange glowing text and indistinct shapes on the screen flickered more like real warning signals than just in-game graphics. As she started investigating the source of these odd symbols, an unexpected glow emanated from the depths of her gaming chair. The music and sound effects in her ears morphed into an eerie frequency, severing her connection to reality. In an instant, she found herself in a vast darkness floating in an empty void among the stars. Around her, breathtaking hues of green, blue, pink, and colors she couldn't even name shimmered in an extraordinary spectacle. Her heart pounded with fear, but at the same time, an indescribable wave of excitement surged through her body. Mira's live stream fell silent, her room dissolved into nothingness, and the universe she knew completely changed. She was no longer just a gamer girl playing a space adventure. She was now inside the game itself, a pioneer who had to struggle for survival in a mysterious realm. The first thing that appeared before her was a strange alien spaceship floating in the sky. It had a metallic hue shifting towards purple, sleek yet ominous, reflecting the light of the surrounding stars while holding countless unknown secrets that mesmerized her. She had no idea what surprises awaited her in this new world. But one thing was certain, she wouldn't let go of this story. Because now, she was no longer just an observer or a player, she was the protagonist of a journey where she had to uncover the key to mysteries and distinguish between friend and foe to survive. After a moment of panic, Mira pulled herself together and began to examine her surroundings. The metallic spaceship hovering in the dark void of space emitted almost no light. Its sleek contours were only visible due to the faint reflection of distant stars on its surface. A strange feeling deep inside her, perhaps her in-game instincts, whispered that she knew how this ship worked. That couldn't be possible in reality. After all, she was just a gamer. Yet, she found herself drifting toward the ship. As she approached, a console panel lit up faintly on the ship's metallic surface. The moment she touched it, familiar menu icons appeared beneath her fingers. It was the same control interface she had used countless times in the game. Of course, no such technology existed in real life, but things that didn't confuse her in the digital world now felt far more real. The mechanical sounds rising from within signaled the opening of an automatic door. The ship was ready to welcome Mira aboard. The first room she entered was the pilot's cabin. Despite seeming old and abandoned, the interior was surprisingly clean and fully functional. She had expected dust-covered surfaces and broken equipment, but the ship's pristine condition unsettled her even more. It was as if someone had used it recently, or perhaps its system was self-maintaining. As she sat in the captain's chair, a light flutter of anxiety swelled in her chest. The ship's interface was eerily similar to her favorite spacecraft from the game. The control sticks, lighting, and button layout were nearly identical. The soft pink neon lights illuminating the dark cabin brought back memories. She felt as if she could pilot this ship. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and recalled the movements she used when executing her favorite maneuvers. Then, one by one, she pressed a series of buttons. The ship's engines let out a coughing noise before slowly coming to life. Screens flickered on in sequence, control panels displaying planet names, coordinates, and star maps. Myra's gaming instincts kicked in first. She had to determine her location, then find the nearest suitable landing site. Yet, one question gnawed at her mind, still unanswered: how do I return to the real world? Was there an exit portal in this realm? Did she need to complete a specific mission? Or was she simply trapped here? When she clicked on the ship's database tab labeled Nearby Planets, a large sphere appeared on the screen. Its surface was a mix of blue and green hues, registered as Thetis 2. Both its atmospheric conditions and surface temperature seemed habitable. Had I ever encountered this planet in the game before? She wondered. She couldn't recall. Perhaps it was part of an unexplored map. She wasn't sure what to do, but she knew one thing: the rules here were similar to those in the game, so if she followed them, she might survive and find a way out. To answer the questions in her mind and learn which galaxy she was in, as well as what dangers lurked ahead, she decided to land on Thetis 2. The ship began to move forward, gliding like a beam of light through the darkness, and Myra's heart pounded with excitement. Perhaps she was completely alone in this desolate space, but at least she knew her next step. If there was an intelligent civilization, she would gather information from them. If not, she would explore the environment, search for alien ruins, and track any clues leading to an exit. As the light from distant stars slowly faded beyond the bridge's massive window, Thetis 2's velvety silhouette loomed ever larger. Myra took a deep breath and activated the ship's automatic landing protocol. She had a mission to accomplish: to find a way out of this world or game. And her first task was to unravel the mystery of Thetis 2. It was becoming increasingly clear this was no longer just a game. She was living in a dimension where real dangers and real wonders coexisted. A massive metropolis stretched before her, disappearing beneath the neon glow of towering skyscrapers. The ship seamlessly connected to the spaceport's automated system, completing a smooth landing. Red and blue-lit guidance lines on the metallic ground directed Myra straight toward a customs-like checkpoint. Yet, there were no queues, documents, or restrictions. Everyone was freely entering and leaving the port. As she merged into the bustling crowd, Myra widened her eyes, taking in the sights. Towering buildings, holographic advertisements, vehicles hovering between alleyways. The city was alive with chaotic energy. Most of the people passing by appeared human, but among them were creatures of various alien species, with unusual colors and intriguing physiologies. Some wore metallic suits, while others donned exotic, gleaming armor. Stalls lined the streets, emitting strange aromas, displaying shimmering crystals, massive swords, laser weapons, and even machine-assisted wing prosthetics, an assortment of goods beyond imagination. With sweaty palms, Myra approached a shop window. The store, enhanced by moving holograms, displayed an array of equipment for sale. Men and women, humans and aliens alike, wore different levels of armor and wielded weapons. Do I have any money? She wondered. What do they use here instead of currency? Credits, points, or some kind of XP, like in the game. Just then, something on the opposite sidewalk caught her attention, a name glowing above a person's head. At first, she couldn't believe her eyes. It read Drazer. The young man, clad in dark attire and carrying a massive laser rifle, exuded the aura of a typical player. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Drazer seemed to notice her name floating above her head. To Myra, his expression flickering with brief surprise before he continued walking. Myra could hear her own heartbeat. These names, are they just like the usernames above players' heads in the game? She asked herself. This city wasn't just populated by NPCs, the programmed residents of the game. Other players were here as well, moving through the streets, just like her. Then, as she passed a shop with a reflective glass-paneled exterior, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection. Above her head, glowing letters followed her every move. Myra, her name, her player identity, hung over her like it did in the game. How is this possible? She whispered. A mixture of curiosity and unease washed over her. She was no longer alone. Other players existed in this world. Some could be allies, while others might be rivals or enemies. She wasn't just here to experience the story. She also had to factor in the strategies of other players. The question gnawed at her mind: if this really is a game, what do I need to do to escape? The weight of her glowing name above her felt oddly heavy. The city was dense and chaotic, but the rules were clear. With enough resources and the right equipment, she could survive, forge powerful alliances, and perhaps uncover clues about how to escape. Mira quickened her pace, plunging deeper into the neon-lit streets. Maybe someone here knew the secret to leaving the game. Or perhaps she would find a guide who could explain what this game truly was. Mira flinched at the sudden sound of explosions, her body tensing as the deafening booms filled the air. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of her surroundings. A wave of hot wind brushed against her face, carrying dust and neon-lit debris swirling in the chaos. As she tilted her head upwards, she spotted a massive countdown timer in the sky, ticking down from 30 minutes. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. The city streets were in absolute turmoil. Humans and aliens alike were fleeing in all directions, while explosions shook the very foundations of the metropolis. Then she noticed a group approaching from the distance. Like her, they had usernames glowing above their heads, but something about them wasn't settling. Their appearances were bizarre, as if they belonged to an entirely different alien race. Their bluish skin shimmered under the neon glow, and their intricate holographic armor gave off an ominous light. Each of them wielded glowing energy swords, cutting down everything in their path, NPCs and players alike. So they're not just attacking the NPCs, they're targeting us other players, she realized. These attackers had to be from a completely different clan or faction. She barely had time to react before laser blasts zipped just over her head, forcing her to drop flat onto the ground behind a pile of rubble. Before she could even catch her breath, one of the armored attackers locked onto her and lunged forward, energy sword raised high. Her only escape was a narrow gap beside the pavement. "What do I do?" she thought in panic. This was still a game, right? Yet she could feel the scorching heat of the explosions, the sharp sting of the wind against her skin. The pain here felt terrifyingly real. Just as the attacker's sword came slashing down, a sudden burst of coordinated gunfire erupted. Bright streaks of laser fire illuminated the air, striking the assailant before they could land a hit. The enemy recoiled and was violently thrown backward before vanishing into thin air as if instantly deleted from the system. Mira's heart pounded as she looked up in disbelief. Standing before her were 4 players, each with a glowing username floating above them. Their armor resembled futuristic combat gear, though far less extreme than the attackers. "If you stay here, you're dead," said one of them, a tall woman with long hair and the username Ombo. A collapsible energy shield was strapped to her back. Next to her, a large, sharp-featured man, Cade, pulled out a spare laser pistol from his belt and handed it to Mira. "If you want to survive, take this and fight with us," he commanded, his expression stern but focused. Mira's mind raced with 1,000 questions, but the roar of explosions and the tension in the air left her no time to think. Her hands trembled as she took the weapon. At that moment, the countdown on the screen above hit 10. It was as if the very sky was counting down. Gritting her teeth, she suddenly spotted an enemy charging at Ombu from behind. Without thinking, she raised her weapon and fired. The attacker vanished just as the countdown reached 1 second. The next second, a blinding light engulfed everything. And then just like that, everything reset. The destroyed streets, burning buildings, the war-torn cityscape, all of it disappeared. The scorching wind turned into a cool night breeze. The towering skyscrapers stood intact once again, their neon lights flickering undisturbed. The people and aliens returned to their normal routines, as if nothing had happened. Mira stood frozen, her pulse racing. The only evidence of the battle was the laser pistol still clutched in her hands. There were no bodies, no bullet casings, no collapsed buildings. The attackers were simply gone. Ombu turned to Mira with a grateful nod. "Thanks for that. You saved me." Mira took a deep breath, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Was that some kind of game event, a tournament, or raid? But she had never felt fear like that in a game before. Looking around, she noticed other players and NPCs reacting differently. Some acted completely oblivious to what had just transpired, while others like her clearly remembered every detail, staring around in confusion. Cade grabbed Myra's shoulders, shaking her slightly to snap her out of it. "They all just vanished?" he said. "Was that just a temporary attack on the city, or is this going to happen again?" Myra shivered as she felt the warmth of his breath against her skin. Something much deeper, much more complex was at play here. How had she even ended up in this world? What was this place really? And what dangers lay ahead before she could find a way out? And now she wasn't alone. She had for strangers who had just saved her life. Maybe in this strange universe, she needed allies. Ambu smiled at her and said, "Come on, let's grab a drink. Maybe we can answer some of your questions." Myra, eager for even a sliver of clarity, agreed. The five of them made their way to one of the city's well-known hangouts, a futuristic pub where neon lights flickered along the walls and holographic menus hovered above tables. As they settled in and ordered drinks, Myra wasted no time. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice laced with urgency. Ambu exhaled before explaining, "The opposing faction has the right to attack our territory for 30 minutes. If they manage to capture the main crystal, they'll attack again tomorrow. If they fail, then it's our turn to strike." Myra frowned. "And what do they get from attacking?" Ambu's expression darkened. "They take everything from whoever they kill, all their gear, all their credits. And as for what happens after you die, no one knows. But one thing is certain, we've never seen the same person come back." She paused before adding, "If you stay like this, you won't last long. You need to start learning how to fight and upgrading your gear. First things first, you need to check your bank balance." Myra followed their advice and made her way to a banking terminal. The moment she saw the screen, her breath caught in her throat. 235,223,522,352 credits. It was an insane amount of money, enough to make her one of the most powerful players in this world. The credits Myra had just received were from the players she had killed at the last second. It was an enormous sum, more than enough to equip herself with the best gear available. Without wasting any time, she went straight to the city's top-tier equipment shops. She upgraded every part of her gear to the highest possible level, acquiring an advanced, battle-ready exosuit equipped with energy shields, enhanced mobility, and tactical enhancements. For weapons, she chose a pair of high-powered laser pistols, designed for rapid-fire precision and devastating impact. Now, Myra looked like a force to be reckoned with. Her sleek, futuristic armor glowed with energy circuits, reflecting the neon lights of the city, and her twin laser pistols rested in holsters at her sides, radiating deadly efficiency. But looking powerful wasn't enough, she needed to be powerful. She immersed herself in simulation training, pushing herself to the limit. Time passed quickly as she mastered advanced combat techniques, dodging, aiming, tactical maneuvers, and close-quarters combat. Her reflexes sharpened, her movements became instinctual, and she transformed into a true warrior. By the time she was done, she was ready for the next raid. Determined, Myra made her way back to Ambu and her team. When they saw her, their jaws dropped in disbelief. She had surpassed them by an overwhelming margin. Despite spending countless hours in this world, training and fighting, they weren't even half as strong as she was now. The moment had arrived. It was time for the next raid, but this time, they were the attackers. Myra, Ambu, Cade, and the rest of the team stood before a glowing portal, their gateway to the battlefield. The portal hummed with unstable energy, distorting the air around it. Then, with a sudden pulse of power, it opened. One by one, they stepped through, crossing into the war zone. As Myra emerged on the other side, she took in her surroundings. A massive fortress loomed ahead, its towering walls fortified with defenses. And at the heart of it all, she saw the crystal, pulsing with radiant energy. The objective was clear. The battle had begun. As soon as Myra and her team stepped through the portal, the battlefield erupted into chaos around them. The sky was illuminated by laser beams and explosions. Massive warships hovered above, while alien drones swiftly maneuvered to protect enemy positions. The ground was covered in dust, smoke, and clashing soldiers. Myra blinked rapidly, quickly assessing the situation. The main building, where the crystal pulsed with energy, stood at the very heart of the battlefield. However, reaching it would be anything but easy. Enemy forces had lined up like steel walls in front of the fortress, unleashing death upon any attacker who dared to approach. "Move, spread out," Ambu shouted, firing her laser rifle as she advanced. Mira's muscles tensed. There was no time for hesitation. She drew her twin laser pistols and swiftly slid across the ground, taking out an enemy in front of her. One pistol fired to the right, the other to the left, as she weaved through enemy fire with agile movements. The enemy troops immediately went on high alert, retaliating with high-caliber energy weapons. Cade blasted through obstacles with his heavy weapon, clearing a path, while Ambu provided shield support to teammates whose energy was running low. Just then, a hovering battle drone locked onto them. "They're coming from above," Mira yelled, quickly taking aim and firing 3 precise shots. Blue energy beams struck the drone's power core. A second later, it crashed to the ground in a fiery explosion, but they hadn't noticed the enemies closing in behind them. A squad of dark-armored enemy soldiers launched a swift counterattack. Energy blasts zipped past Mira's head, forcing her to roll back into cover. "They're pinning us down," Ambu shouted. "Don't split up, stay together." Cade anchored his massive laser cannon into the ground, unleashing a devastating energy blast that obliterated enemy positions. Yet, there were still too many opponents. Reaching the fortress seemed impossible. Then, Mira noticed something shocking. Right in the middle of the enemy formation was an opening, a side passage, a weak point in their defenses that had gone unnoticed. "Follow me, they haven't noticed the gap," she yelled. Ambu and the team reacted instantly. Ducking and weaving, they rushed through the explosions. By the time the enemy realized what was happening, Mira and her team had already slipped inside the fortress walls. Now, only one obstacle remained, the main hall. And inside, the crystal's guardians were waiting for them. Mira gritted her teeth, gripping her weapons tightly. "This isn't over yet," she declared, and the real battle began. Mira and her team stepped into the fortress, only to find themselves in an entirely different battle. Narrow corridors were filled with enemy soldiers. Laser blasts melted the walls, forcing the team to move strategically. Ambu quickly pulled up a holographic map to find an escape route. "We need to create a distraction to keep the enemies busy. We have to reach the crystal chamber in one piece," Cade said, reloading his weapon. Mira scanned her surroundings. She noticed large energy canisters lining the corridor. "If we blow those up, the enemies will be forced to retreat." Ambu nodded. "Great idea." The team quickly placed several explosives on the canisters and set the timers. The moment they retreated, a series of massive explosions shook the corridors, taking down enemy soldiers in their wake. Now, only one obstacle remained: the heavy doors of the crystal chamber. "There has to be a way to open this," Ambu muttered while examining the security panels. Mira's eyes locked onto a small digital screen in front of her. It required a username entry. She narrowed her eyes and typed her own name before pressing enter. The doors unlocked instantly. The rest of the team exchanged shocked glances. "How did you do that?" Cade asked. Mira simply shook her head. "I don't know." As the massive doors creaked open, a breathtaking sight greeted them. A colossal crystal stood in the center of the room, glowing with radiant blue and purple energy. The entire chamber was eerily silent, as if the chaos of battle couldn't penetrate this sacred space. But something felt off. No one dared to touch the crystal. Mira frowned and asked, "Why are we just standing here? Aren't we supposed to take it?" Ambu's expression turned serious. "Because," she said slowly, "whoever takes the crystal disappears just like the ones who die. No one knows where they go. No one has ever come back." Mira's heart pounded. Was this a trap? Her thoughts raced, but deep inside, she felt that the crystal held answers. If there was a way out of this world, this was the key. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached out for the crystal. A blinding flash of light consumed the room. The voices around her faded, and her body felt as if it were being pulled into a weightless void. Myra's vision darkened. The last thing she heard was Umbu's desperate scream. "Myra, what are you doing?" And then, everything vanished. When Myra opened her eyes, she found herself in an empty, pure white room. There was nothing, just silence. The only thing that stood out was a door directly in front of her, with a small keypad beside it. She approached it and examined the screen. She had 3 attempts to enter the correct code. But she had no idea what the code could be. She took a guess and entered a number. Incorrect. She tried again. Still wrong. Only 1 attempt remained. What happens if I get it wrong? She thought. Would she be trapped here? Or would she be erased entirely? Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to think. Then, she remembered the strange numbers she had seen at the bank terminal. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now, the numbers stuck in her mind. 2352. It was her only shot. With trembling fingers, she entered the numbers and pressed confirm. Everything vanished into darkness. Myra suddenly opened her eyes under a sharp, glaring light. As she lifted her head, she found herself back in her room, sitting at her computer. Her breathing was unsteady, and her forehead was drenched in sweat. She glanced at the screen. Her live stream was still running. She had been live for 36 hours. Staring in shock, she saw the chat window overflowing with thousands of messages. "Myra, did you fall asleep? What was this stream? You've been here for 36 hours. You just moved. Are you alive?" She rubbed her face with her hands. Was it real, or just a dream? Taking a deep breath, she closed the stream. Just as she was about to exit the game, a notification popped up in the lower left corner of her screen. "Sender OMBU." Myra's blood ran cold. She froze, staring at the screen. Her entire body trembled as she moved her mouse over the message and clicked to open it.